Thank you, Ariana. So I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. It's a pretty good turnout for such a hot day. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is John Doyle. I'm president of the board of City Island Rising. A lot of our board members, believe it or not, have come down with either COVID or are sick. I have not seen them, but we do wish them well, the two that are, and then there's another one who's feeling a little under the weather, so we encourage them not to come tonight because we don't want to get any of you sick. So as a result, we have masks right here, and if you'd like to, you can put one on. We want everyone to feel safe, and I'm going to try to practice social distancing because I can't wear the mask and kind of really carry on this. We have a lot of good guests tonight, and we have a lot of topics to cover. So we have, and I appreciate that. People want me to look my best here. This is being broadcast to probably several dozen people on Facebook. So. But we do want to have a very constructive discussion tonight. We have two guests that are going to speak about issues that are of significant importance to City Island. First guest is Jake. Jake is from the Waterfront Alliance. Jake is going to speak a lot about the different initiatives they have, and we are going to be looking to work with them to put up an educational programming, which is going to be a lot of his focus. As many of you know, we are advocating rather, that City Island should consider a ferry stop on City Island. We have not said from where. There's a petition right by where Stephen is over there. If people have not yet signed, but I think everyone here has signed. We've gotten over 1,000 people, and we're going to continue to push for that, and we're going to be working with the Waterfront Alliance to make that happen. So I'm going to hand it off to him in a minute. And then we have another guest who's also here from NYSERDA. She is very important. I'm sorry, Jenny. Sorry, Jenny. Jenny's here from NYSERDA. She's going to speak about something that could be really, truly transformative to this neighborhood. If anyone here knows, remember about a year ago, David Diaz, who's behind here, our board member, and I were speaking about that there was going to be transformational climate legislation passing in the state of New York, and it did pass. Senator Biaggi voted for it, Senator Benedetto voted for it. We are a coastal community, so climate change affects us for real. Part of what's happening now is there was a climate council that's been set up, and there are disadvantaged communities where they measure a whole host of criteria, including how likely you're to flood, including how likely you are for emergency services, including a lot of things. And City Island is considered a disadvantaged community. So the money that is raised for the climate bill is through NYSERDA. So this is a very good person to be speaking to, and a very good agency that we're going to be hearing a lot about going forward. We know we have resiliency. We have a guy by the door, by the way, if we can just let him in. We have a lot of resiliency needs on the island itself, as everyone here knows, and we've got to start addressing them. And thankfully, hopefully, due to the climate legislation, we're going to be on a track to doing so. So two very important guests for City Island. As we did, we promised an update, if you will, or a good news segment. So I'm going to start with that because we want to get the good news out of the way. As everyone here knows, we have been a part of the New York Renews Coalition. This is an environmental advocacy group of about 200 groups. This is some of the environmental advocacy we do, including going to testify before the Climate Council, is through coordination with them. They have decided to give a capacity building grant to City Island Rising to the tune of $20,000, which we very much appreciate. So that money is going to go towards a few things, which I'm going to lay out very briefly right now. We're going to be building a website. We're going to be hiring a fellow to do a resiliency study. And we're going to be doing more to advance the Community and Climate Investment Act, which is a bill to bring $15 billion to frontline communities in the state so that we don't have any more Hurricane Iras, no more Hurricane Sandys where we are not prepared. So we are going to be doing a resiliency study and a needs statement on our own for this community. So that way, when policymakers, perhaps from NYSERDA, perhaps from other places, come and ask us what we want, we're going to have the whole book there for them, all done. City Island needs this. This is where we flood. These are our transportation needs. These are where we have vulnerable people. That is all going to be done as a result of this $20,000. So more, stay tuned on that.
Wow.
So, if anyone's watching from New Yorker News, thank you. We're going to get to our guest in just one quick minute. I just wanted to start really quickly, if that's okay, with two updates. So we have two different, I don't want to call them committees, but working groups, if you will. One is with respect to the COAD, which we've spoken about several times here, which is Community Organizations Active in Disasters. This is a group that is Lois Way, Nancy Keck, Beverly Jones, myself, and I'm forgetting one person, which I apologize because that person's probably watching and I'm going to get like hate mail after this, but that's fine. But we are trying to put together the building blocks to do emergency preparedness for the island, bring OEM out here, start doing trainings. So this is going to be a very good first step. The second thing we are doing is we are advancing our Adopt a Block program. So we're going to be tabling. This is a initiative we're going to be starting where we want people on all different blocks of the island. We will give you the tools. We will provide support when applicable. And by getting enough people involved, we'll be able to keep the island looking a lot nicer. It's also going to be a little bit of a social service thing. We're going to adopt adopt a buddy type program to check on some of the senior and the infirm. So we have high hopes for this. Stephen Dershowitz is here. He is a part of this group, and I'm going to hand over the mic to him because he has a list of things we're going to be collecting. And well, actually, no, you're going to give me the list, and we're going to get Home Depot to give them out actually. So I will take that. But Stephen's been very helpful in this, and this is when we talk about the things we're going to need: bags, gloves, brooms, garbage pickers, and dustpans, among other things. And we're also going to count on the people who are part of this program. If your block has flooding, we want you to take those photos because we're still working with the New York Sea Grant program to document those things and to hopefully, once we get money coming in from the state through the Climate Action Council, to address those things. So it's not lost on any of us. With that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to the Waterfront Alliance folks. So let's give him a hand, Jeff. He came all the way out here.
You okay if I sit?
Sure.
Great. Hi everyone. Thank you for having me. Just to lay out a little bit of groundwork, I'm not going to be discussing anything with the ferry tonight. My associate, Karen Imus, she was called down to DC, so she'll be down there for the next few days. So I'm here just to talk about the education initiative, hopefully with City Island Rising and possibly PS 175. With that being said, let me just kind of lay out a little bit about Waterfront Alliance. So we are a bi-state organization. We're based in Manhattan and Midtown, but we do work all around all 5 boroughs and New Jersey. We have 3 main program focuses. The first is our Waterfront Edge Design Guidelines. If you know anything about LEED for buildings, it's something similar to that for waterfront developments, originally around the city, but it's starting to expand out nationally. We also have our Rise to Resilience program, which is a coalition of more than 1,000 Alliance partners around both New York and New Jersey, advocating for policies, supporting the waterfront both around New York State and New Jersey. And then we have our Environmental Education Department, which I head, our Estuary Explorers program. With that being said, I'm going to just talk a little bit about the education program, a little bit about this grant that we're applying for in partnership with City Island Rising, and a little bit about how we expect this program to go and how we'd like it to go. So the program Estuary Explorers was started about 5 years ago with the goal of connecting schools and students with their waterfront. We work alongside wonderful organizations here in New York, but what we really thought made us stand out was the fact that we bring students directly to their own waterfront. So you'll oftentimes see throughout the city, school buses bring students to different organizations, to their waterfront, but we really like to connect students with their closest publicly accessible waterfront. I cannot tell you how many times I've spoken with students and teachers and they've told me that they didn't even realize that they lived by water. So we really think it's a very good initiative and one that we're very proud of. The past couple of years has seen us expand despite COVID. We expanded out to virtual programs for the past 2 years, and we've shifted back to in-person programs. Just today, I was in Washington Heights teaching a few classes, an indoor class, getting ready to go out for a waterfront field lab. And the way that these other programs tend to work is that when we bring students out to the waterfront, we'll just do basic water quality testing. We'll test the salinity, pH, temperature, and then discuss, what that means for a healthy waterfront. And so with City Island Rising and with PS 175, we're applying for a grant through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation called Long Island Sound's Future Fund. We've applied and received this funding before. It's how we were able to do the Viva La Sound Festival last year, which it was a very last minute decision and one that we were just so happy to be a part of. And through this funding, we would love to do a partnership with PS 175 in the realm of a multi-week program or a teacher residency program. So the past year or so, we've been partnering with schools in Staten Island, Washington Heights, like I said, Lower Manhattan, and we've been doing basically like 5-week programs. We'll go to a school, we'll work with a teacher, and we'll teach them how to implement climate change and coastal resilience education in their own classroom. And so we kind of picture something similar with PS 175. I'm not sure if anyone from PS 175 is here. Yes?
No, I just want you to know that there's another organization called the City Island Oyster Reef.
Oh yeah, that's we did the Viva La Sound last year.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, and we work with PS 175 and have an education program right now.
Oh, fantastic.
So we should be partnering. We've been working for 2 years and gotten money. Okay, so.
Yeah. It's exactly what we're advocating for, 100%.
We should definitely partner because we've been working with the teachers and the students.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a different program, so I want to let Jeff
Are you
talk
sure?
on. Well, we're not going to know unless we have next week, right? We got to let Jeff talk.
Yeah. So yeah, the way that we kind of picked this program, and I have it laid out here in a one-pager for anyone who's interested. But the program basically works in the way that you just described. So we'll go to the school, we'll lead students out to the waterfront that's accessible near them. I believe Ambrosini Field is a pretty close, accessible waterfront. And we'll do the water quality testing. But the way we kind of picture this going is we'll come back for multiple weeks after that. We have an education toolkit that we released. We released it about 2 years ago, but we have a re-release of it right here for anyone who's also interested in checking it out. And we have multiple activities in there. So, for instance, we have very simple activities from like a card game. So you would have like a deck of cards, you draw a card, and it would say something like, there's an oil spill or there's been a paint spill in the water. Like, how many fish out of your estuary do you take? And they have like a little pretend estuary with Swedish fish or goldfish in it. It's a very fun, cute activity, but it really gets the point across. To something a little more advanced, so something along the lines of permeable and impermeability mapping around a student's school, around a student's neighborhood, which after Hurricane Ida this past year is something that we're really pushing to get into schools and get education about the benefits of green spaces, not just for the sense of having it being publicly accessible, but also they serve important purposes like preventing too much stormwater from flooding an area. To other activities, this is one we actually did at the Viva La Sound Festival last year. We had a couple baking trays set up. Students would build their own model shoreline. They would pour rice into it. We'd collect water, and then they would have sponges to show the benefits of having natural shorelines versus things like riprap versus having no shoreline. Just a multitude of activities, and so we would love to work with some of the teachers there. Maybe do 2 residency programs along with 3 community festivals, something along the line of Viva La Sound, and then also maybe something else that we could partner and coordinate with City Island Rising or another organization here. That's about all I have for this. I'm happy to take any questions, any comments. I also have an annual report for Waterfront Alliance. It goes into a little bit of the work that we've been doing the past year or so.
If anyone has a question, raise your hand. We'll bring the mic right over to you so everyone will hear you. Does anyone have a question about which of some? Okay. You may need to stand up a little because the mics together may.
Yeah.
We don't want to deafen any of our neighbors and friends here.
Okay, I was wondering, with regard to working with teachers and students and schools, how does your program fit into the learning objectives that they have at the state level?
That's a great question. So all of our activities follow along with the next generation science standards. So we try to line that. We'll work with the teacher and we'll ask them, what's the curriculum that you're working in right now? What are the lesson plans that you have? And we tend to line it up whenever it works. Like, say they're learning about like basic ecology for like a 7th or 8th grade science class, or for like an AP bio class. We'll line it up with whatever they're teaching and try to make whatever lesson we're teaching more ecological focus. Say we're working with like an AP environmental science class and they're working on they're learning about like the benefits of wetlands and like learning about like the basics of that. Then we'll kind of tailor our activity for that. So we follow the next generation science standards and then also try to line it up with the teachers' curriculum and lessons.
Barbara?
Yes. Does this work?
Yes.
Hello? Okay, so we've got to turn this into a win-win, because we also have gotten money from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to build an educational center in behind the field with the school, and we've been working with the teachers. So we can work together. I'm not saying that this is going to be, competitive, but we are also in the process with the Board of Ed, the Bronx superintendent, getting PS 175 to become a marine ecology school. I mean, in other words, we've been working for 2 years along with BOP's curriculum. So I'm sure that your curriculum is fantastic, but we need to build this in, or So and
Absolutely.
Eric is here, but behind the field is our living shoreline, which we've gotten several grants to build the actual living shoreline behind the school, behind the field. And that's where we have an educational center, outdoor learning lab that we've created. So we need to be able to figure out how this can work together.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And it seems like a lot of what the organizations and yourself and BOP, a lot of that is ecologically focused. And we're actually trying to move away from that, because we find that there are other organizations doing a better job than we are, and we want to switch to a more infrastructure focused curriculum. So working us on that part, and then you kind of focusing on the ORS that I'm sure that BOP has installed there. I definitely see that as an opportunity.
Yeah, we do water quality testing, we do ORS cage monitoring, we do a lot of work with the kids.
And we very much appreciate what you do and what Sit on the Oyster Project does. This is step one of a multi-step process, and step one is just introducing what we're doing to the community, and that we're applying for this grant. And we're going to try to do some work with the middle schoolers and make sure that there's much more of a waterfront education going on here in terms of what's in the waterfront and what we can do to improve water quality. And then I'm sure there will be partnership opportunities with your organization. It's not meant to, we're coming in to be new and better or something like that, not at all. This is just meant to be a different focus and ways we can work together. That's all.
Yeah.
And we will find ways to work together, as we have many times in the past. Okay, does anyone else have a question? Oh, also, just so people understand, because I don't want there to be any sort of false advertising here, and I very much appreciate Jake coming. There was another person from the Waterfront Alliance who was supposed to come to speak more towards the ferry. So, unfortunately, she got caught up in something, and she couldn't make it. But just to give everybody just a brief update on that, there's been some media stories about it. We've hit over 1,000 signatures. I know that not everybody wants a ferry, and that is fine. You're never going to get 100% agreement on anything in this world, but what we are trying to do here is to advance the cause, and we are going to be working very closely with the Waterfront Alliance and with Karen to have those meeting with legislators, to have that meeting with EDC, which oversees the NYC ferry program, to have that meeting with Hornblower, to have that meeting, which the people who run the boats actually, and to have those discussions. So if you happen to live on Fordham Street, which is a wonderful block, and God bless you, no one, amen, no one is saying it has to be on your block. Nobody is trying to put it in front of someone else's house. Look, we all live on City Island. It's 4,500 people, 9,000 different opinions, and 1,800 different stories. We all know this. And sometimes misinformation comes by the boatload. But we all know that this is a way of the future. We know that $150 million has been appropriated by the federal government to expand ferry lines. And this is everybody's tax dollars, whether you like the ferry or you don't. But we are going to advocate to make sure that your tax dollars are spent here in your neighborhood, and that it is at least considered, and people are brought into that process. And on that note, does anyone have any more questions for Jake about the program? We are going to be updating you on this many, many times in the future. This is going to be a nice summer program to involve our kids and collaborate with them, because what I find here is a lot of people like to speak about the children, yet they don't talk to the children, and they have no interaction with the children. And sometimes they think the children, they have some very antiquated views on children. So the point is that we are going to be doing something to give young adults a creative outlet to get them more involved in the environment. And given that we're on an island, maybe that's a good thing. Questions, comments, concerns for Jake? Yes.
Sorry to do this again, but I just wanted to tell you I did a very similar thing a long time ago, working with NASA to do educational outreach, and the teachers kind of lay out the red carpet to their door. If you give them applied learning with science education standards melded into them, it's almost like they love you for doing that, because the kids just fold right into applied learning, and it seems like that's what you're doing as well. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but I just thought I'd say that.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
John? Very quick.
Absolutely, I agree on
Sure. I wholly agree. I'm a science teacher.
Uh,
Yeah. So middle school, just going to say absolutely. Like, the easier that you make it, so the standards are very clear. You have the alignment. Make it for next gen very easy. And a lot of the city schools are using Amplify. So if you have cross-referencing with Amplify curriculum, and you're working again with the grade levels that have that greater focus, though you're not fully ecology thinking about man-made impact and thinking about systems, I can absolutely see how this would be super engaging, especially coming through the pandemic as we have been in school. So just happy to hear that this is happening.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
And because no person is an island, even if they live on City Island, someone who deserves a lot of credit for this is David Diaz, who's been going to the school and involving the educators, so let's thank him. Anyway, you wouldn't do it yourself, so I've got to shut you out. So before we transition on to NYSERDA, which is another very important point of this evening, I just want to give a few brief community updates. I know usually I have the 1 to 2 page agenda and we go through it together. Today's been a busy day at the hospital and I have not had the opportunity to do that today. So I'm going to give some very, very brief updates. First, 181 City Island Avenue, this is the building across the street from the school. I am aware of some of the issues that were going on there. Something was thrown from one of the apartments onto the street. I'm aware of it. I made sure the 45th Precinct's aware of it. I reached out to the management company to make sure that the roofs above are not accessible, to anyone to just go up there. So we're working on that. We've heard you. As people know, we have a speed camera here on the island. It wasn't easy to get. It took a lot of lobbying, both of the mayor's office and our state legislators. That camera, in almost any other neighborhood, would solve all our problems. But in City Island, we have a unique traffic situation where a camera being on from 6 in the morning to 10 at night, Monday through Friday, is not going to deal with the weekend traffic that we face. I bring this up because we have 10 or 12 more days of the legislative session still available, and they have to renew the speed cameras, and we have been asking, and I think our state legislators are on board, with removing, the state actually has to allow the city to remove the time frames off those speed cameras. I'm aware of the many accidents that have happened, even before we're in the summer season, from the car flipping over to the young man who was hit on the corner of Hawkins Street, who's thankfully okay, to the 2 accidents by the bridge. So I'm aware of all these things. But as I said earlier, no person is an island, even if they live on City Island. So this is where you all need to come in. If you feel that and you may not feel this way, but if you do feel that the island would be better off by maybe another speed camera, maybe having the speed light, the time restrictions off that speed camera, maybe allowing the city to expand red light cameras. There's only 150 red light cameras in the entire city of New York. Think about how many street corners there are in the city of New York. It's not right, and the laws need to be modernized. So it requires the city and the state to work together. So I encourage everybody, whatever your views are, and I'm not telling you what to think, call your city council member, call your state assembly member, call your state senator, because the status quo is not working here, in my opinion. And we need to make these streets safe for everyone who lives here. Last issue is something that was brought to my attention from friends on Bound Street. There was a minor, and everyone's okay, there was a minor fire on Kirby Street about a month ago, and friends of mine on Bound Street called 911. And the 911 call center, for their cell phone or whatever, rerouted them to Long Island. You've had that experience. Okay, then I need to talk to you as well. This is a problem. So, Andrea, I thank you for telling me that. And now it's on video, so that way I'll remember it. And I'm going to coordinate with you. This shouldn't be happening. And I mentioned this to the 45th Precinct, and they were very surprised to hear it as well. So if this is happening to you, either you're watching online or you have friends, if you can mention it in conversation, this shouldn't be happening. And we want to address this as soon as possible. So we're working on that. In the realm of cell phone reception related stuff, how many people here are on their phone when they're driving? Of course, hands-free, because we want to be legal here. We're not trying to get anyone in trouble. And they're leaving the island, and they're in Pelham Bay Park, and what happens? Drop off. That's right. How many people have had that happen to them? Show of hands. Everybody, pretty much. So we have been in touch with Senator Schumer's office and with T-Mobile, and T-Mobile is looking to fix their cell phone tower in the park, which many other providers go off of. They have not been able to do that because their tower, believe it or not, is on Amtrak property, right near the old Bartow line. But through some federal intervention, they are starting to talk to one another, and we're hopeful that this matter can be addressed in the next few months. So, moving forward, you shouldn't have as many dropped calls, because it happens to me almost every day. So I feel you, and we're trying to address it. And then finally, on a thank you front, because we're trying to do appreciation for the good work everyone here does, we have the Elizabeth Mass Memorial. Everyone knows Elizabeth was the construction worker who lost her life due to gun violence. Over 50 people turned out. It was a wonderful ceremony. Her daughter was there, her children were there. They were very touched by it. So I want to thank everybody who came out. And the bench now reads Elizabeth Mass, the mayor of City Island, right by the memorial. And we're going to be doing a memorial tree there as well. So if you'd like to donate to the tree, we're like $100 or $200 off. You can go to the GoFundMe page and give the money, but I'm confident we're going to get the tree. But any donations are appreciated. And I want to thank Beverly Jones of our team, who coordinated that entire event, made it very meaningful. Clementina Esposito read a nice poem there that I think kind of summed up the mixture of emotions people were feeling. And I want to thank Pastor Jenkins, who's been to our meetings before as a guest, Pastor Gooding, and Reverend Jolly, who all came, who spoke to the loss people felt. And then secondly, I want to thank our team who worked on Teacher Appreciation Day, which includes Peter Gennari from here in Clipper Coffee. We brought the Clipper Mobile down to the school, and all the teachers got free coffee, free bagels, free baked goods. It was a very nice event. And I want to thank Teresa Cavity of our team who put that together. She works with Peter. They got it done. And finally, I want to thank Raphael Schweitzer. There was some graffiti that was etched towards the beginning of the island, racial in nature, and he got it removed. How, what, we're not going to get into because it might not have been what you call totally on the up and up, but he got it done. So, Raphael, if you're watching, thank you, sir. With that in mind, because we do have another guest here, I want to call up Jenny from NYSERDA, who's going to be nice enough to explain to us the climate action councils and what distressed communities mean. Thank you, Jenny.
Let's give her a round of applause, please.
Thank you, John. Is this an okay place to sit? Okay. All right, so might be referring to my computer for notes at some point, but hello, my name is Jenny Bock, and I am on NYSERDA's Energy Climate Equity team. I actually spoke with you all in my other former position as an organizer at Friends of the Earth US, and grateful to still be in touch with David and all of you. So have people heard of NYSERDA? Maybe yes. Okay, so NYSERDA is a New York State energy agency. It stands for New York State Energy Research Development Authority, and it's a unique, I guess, agency that not a lot of states have, in that it is dedicated to doing originally just research on and energy for the state, and now it's really focused on not just researching, but also doing a lot of funding and making investments in renewable energy. It used to be not just renewable energy, different sources of energy. We used to do more research on nuclear and other, but now we're focused very much on clean energy sources, and primarily offshore wind, solar, hydro, and I could name a few others, I guess. But anyway, we're trying to be a leader on offshore wind, especially with all the waterfront we have. But to go to the Climate Act, so thankfully to all the work you all put in, and in coordination with New York Renews, this really great historic climate law was passed in New York in 2019, and we're right now in the process of implementing this climate law. And as John mentioned, there is a Climate Action Council that was formed, and that's actually part of the law, what it requires. And it's a really exciting part of this law, because it really helps make sure that the implementation of the law is done in a more democratic, community-led way, where the Climate Action Council is made up of different sub-working groups. There's one dedicated to looking at labor issues and how do we do a just transition. There's a climate justice working group, which is made up of environmental justice organizations across the whole state. And then there's the larger Climate Action Council, which all these working groups fit under. That comprises of, again, community interests, industry, business interests, and also government. So NYSERDA and other state agencies all are chairs of these different working groups, and all have this collective decision-making body that is in charge of figuring out how to implement our great climate law. So I guess I can go over some of the highlights of the law. Basically, it is committing us legally to transitioning 100% to renewable energy and reduce our emissions by 2050. We have to be net zero economy-wide by 2050. And
if we're still here, yeah.
we actually, you all advocacy groups were pushing for an even more ambitious timeline because we don't have time. So, but this is what we were able to do, and we're hoping to have 100% zero carbon electricity by 2040. So that's just for the electricity sector, and as we all know, a lot of emissions are from the electricity sector. And the law also requires a certain amount of different power sources to be generated, which is a big deal. Because, again, before this climate law, we had a lot of renewable energy goals, but unless it's legally mandated, it's not going to happen, or it was happening a lot more slowly. So we're aiming for 70% renewable energy electricity by 2030, and that will be a mix of 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035, 6,000 megawatts of distributed solar by 2025, 3,000 megawatts of energy storage by 2030. That's like battery storage and other forms of storage. And then another source of through on-site energy savings. So that's one of the biggest parts of the law, but I think the thing that is really historic about it also is that there's a huge climate justice mandate of the law, where it requires that at least 35%, with a goal of reaching 40% benefits from any clean energy project or energy efficiency project. Investments from those types of projects have 35 to 40% have to go to quote unquote disadvantaged communities. And the law defines disadvantaged communities as in general terms, but the Climate Action Council and actually the Climate Justice Working Group, which is made up of community-led, environmental justice organizations, is in charge of defining what we mean by a disadvantaged community. Because once that is defined, that really determines where investments go across the state. So that definition of what is a disadvantaged community was released in January. So there's a very specific definition, but the general definition is it consists of low-income communities, communities of color, communities that are at risk to climate impacts, including flooding and extreme heat. Also includes a lot of various environmental and so environmental like pollution factors and climate risk factors, and then a whole host of different more sociodemographic indicators like race, again, income, a lot of more niche indicators that I can go into more depth if anyone's interested. But basically, we took a lot of different types of data metrics and came up with a certain set of census tracts across the state that are deemed disadvantaged. And so yes, City Island is considered a disadvantaged community under this disadvantaged criteria is what we're calling it. So I can go more in depth, I guess, in that. But the really big part of this is it's basically kind of helping implement justice to those communities that were most disproportionately harmed by the fossil fuel industry and who are also disproportionately impacted by climate change, and by really applying the equity up front in the law and really prioritizing where investments go. Because if we don't prioritize, we all know that these same communities are always underserved, under-resourced, or even excluded if you don't really prioritize them from the beginning. So I guess some specific initiatives, I guess, that will be where disadvantaged communities are prioritized. That's something we're still really working out. That's something my team is trying to work out, is how do you actually define what benefits are? Because we're supposed to be allocating 35-40% benefits to disadvantaged communities. Right now we're defining benefits as monetary, so investments. But then even beyond that, we want to make sure that the money and the impacts are going to those who are actually disadvantaged in a community, because as we all know, there could be factors like gentrification, or how do you know an actual household is really benefiting, or are the jobs local? So we're also looking at measuring benefits through non-monetary benefits like local jobs created, local health benefits. Can you actually see that health outcomes are changing as a result of specific projects that are happening in the community? And I'm working on a couple projects or initiatives. So not only are we trying to, this law requiring that disadvantaged communities are prioritized in investments, is also requiring all state government agencies, and especially at NYSERDA, to redesign our programs so that they are really trying to benefit low-income communities of color, where traditionally that wasn't really a factor. So that's something we're working on a lot at NYSERDA, is like we have some programs that are targeted for low-income communities, but how do we even broaden that out to include other factors like race? So I can tell you about the specific initiatives that right now are benefiting disadvantaged communities. If you're interested, we have this energy efficiency retrofit program where it's called Empower New York. If you qualify with your income, you have to have an income of that household income that's 60% below the state median income, or there's certain geographic areas that you're automatically qualified to get a free energy efficiency retrofit to your home. And that is an example of a resiliency measure as well as a cost-saving measure, especially resiliency for reducing extreme heat impacts. And we don't have any more very specific initiatives in NYSERDA related to flooding yet, especially because we're an energy agency, but there are a lot of examples where we're trying to target flood risks or flood prone areas, or target households that were impacted by an extreme weather event where you have to renovate the whole home because it was impacted by flooding. Where we're trying to target those households for energy efficiency retrofits or even installing electric heat pumps, which electric heat pumps are going to be the main way that we heat and cool homes in the future because they don't emit any carbon emissions. So we're trying to work on targeting homes that were impacted by an extreme weather event, and just while they're doing the whole gut renovation, it makes it much easier to come in and install a heat pump or do energy retrofits. So that's something that we're doing a lot of right now. We did a lot of that actually during Hurricane Ida in Queens. And then the other thing I'm working a lot on is extreme heat. I know it's not flood risk related, but the most deaths actually from any extreme weather events is from extreme heat. So NYSERDA, I'm working with a lot of other state agencies on developing the state's first extreme heat action plan, which is really prioritizing how do we reduce extreme heat risk for disadvantaged communities. And a lot of that, again, is through building retrofits, through energy efficiency measures. Again, heat pumps is a new, more sustainable way of cooling your home. We're also trying to think about how do we make heat pumps more affordable, obviously for low-income households because they're still a little costly. And I'm trying to think, any other resiliency? NYSERDA is currently in the process of trying to, similar to how we're trying to redesign our programs to focus on equity, we're also trying to redesign all of our programs to focus on resiliency. And how can we factor in resiliency in any projects we're developing? Especially obviously thinking about microgrids and how those can be used on a much larger scale for, providing, just during an extreme weather event, providing a stable source of electricity, and also just helping communities be more resilient in general and more self-sustaining and less reliant on the larger grid. So. Yeah, and I guess the more community-oriented engagement initiatives that we're doing, so we're also trying to basically transform how we engage with frontline communities, such as City Island, because historically communities are often engaged with at the very end of process of when a policy or a program is developed. You only get to comment during a public comment period, and then it's, your feedback is factored in, but it would be ideal if you could help design a program or a policy from the beginning. So we're developing this initiative called the Energy Equity Collaborative, which is going to be a collaborative of different community groups that serve and represent disadvantaged communities that will help us develop and design our programs from the beginning and really influence how our program planning process works. And then there's another initiative called the Regional Clean Energy Hubs, which is going to basically they're going to be hubs across this New York State that will be led by a community organization that will get funded by NYSERDA to lead a local hub. And they're going to be helping do community outreach to make sure that communities are actually benefiting from the programs that the state has related to accessing renewable energy and also addressing climate risks. It's going to be focused more on energy now, but I think the hope is to do more focus on climate issues in general, like resiliency. So I'll stop there. That was a lot.
A wealth of information. Thank you for that. I guess, and I know, look, I know that NYSERDA deals with almost everything dealing with the environment and how to make us, more energy efficient. Primarily, that's been a focus of NYSERDA's for a very long period of time. I guess if you could, and I'm going to turn it over to everyone else to ask questions after this. Obviously, we're a disadvantaged community. What can we expect as a disadvantaged community being on City Island? What can we expect in terms of a collaboration with NYSERDA?
Just maybe because Barbara was wondering also, how did we get there? How did City Island?
You have it in writing, actually.
It's on a map. I'll send you the map. I'll put it up before I'll send you the map.
How City Island got to there, and then.
And that it's more than just a map, is there a description?
It's a map and there's criteria on the map. You click on it, it gives, I don't want to steal your thunder here, but you click on it and it tells you how far you are away from emergency medical care, what the average income is, racial demographics, housing vacancy rates, renter, owner occupied units. It's a factor of environmental and other other environmentally toxic sites in your area, which obviously we're going to factor in pretty high on, unfortunately. Things like that. So as a result, we measured very high, and actually it's going to get me to another thing in another segment. But we measured very high. It was a combination of these criteria. It wasn't one criteria over another. It was that we met a lot of risk factors. Where look, as we all know, we're Zone A, so. If anything happens in terms of a Sandy, an Irene, an Ido, whatever, we gotta go. We're gonna be the first people who are mandated to leave our homes. So that's where we are. So it is very important that we have a good collaboration here. But if you could just, how can we as a community hope to work with you in terms of, as this process unfolds with the disadvantaged community?
Yes, good question. So I think, one is I think your disadvantaged communities in general will be prioritized for funding and investments, and I think we're trying to figure out how to structure this, but I think there's going to be a focus on doing more place-based investment planning, where projects maybe in general were just implemented across the board, and we're talking about renewable energy projects and energy efficiency projects. There was not really a way to target where they were being built. So now, because of this priority of making sure 35-40% benefits go to disadvantaged communities, there's going to be more, how can we prioritize building a project in disadvantaged communities and think about a neighborhood-based project, what would City Island, what kind of projects would City Island benefit from? I think that we're still in the early stages of trying to figure out, I guess, how this will work. But the idea is, I think we're looking for ideas on how NYSERDA and then all the other state agencies can do more projects that are catered to the specific needs, a disadvantaged community like the City Island has, which I'm imagining is, obviously a lot of flood risk infrastructure mitigation, but also how can we help with resilient, energy grid infrastructure, and I think how can City Island and your organization be a part of influencing where investments go and how programs are planned, and in terms of making sure that there are City Island-based, neighborhood-based projects. I think being a part of, for example, this community stakeholder body that we're creating, the Energy Equity Collaborative, which I'm leading, that's going to be something that we're looking really to prioritizing in working with communities who serve and represent disadvantaged communities. So having a City Island, organization part of that would be really helpful. Yeah.
You got it. We will definitely help you with that. Okay, questions. Peter first.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Pilot Cove Senior Development here on City Island, which is a low-income, federally subsidized project. You mentioned heat pumps as being the future of air conditioning. I mean, that would be a perfect product where everybody is way below 60% of median in terms of income. And you have, a building that was built without air conditioning at all.
Right.
And people obviously install window air conditioners, which is probably the least efficient way. So as a project that would benefit low-income seniors on City Island, I can't think of a better project.
Agreed.
Thank you for that, Peter. Anyone else over here have a question? Question, comment, concern? Maria, you I'm sorry, I thought I saw a hand up. No worries. Patrick.
Okay, hello. I just wanted to bring it down to the people on City Island. So let me tell you a story. 10 years ago, my wife and I, around 10 years ago, my wife and I were sponsored by NYSERDA, and we filled our roof with solar erected panels. We started making 25 to 30 kilowatt hours a day, and it's the best thing we ever did. But the great thing about it was, the program back then, I'm asking you if it still exists, the installation was maybe back then, was like 35,000, and NYSERDA paid something like 25,000 as a sponsorship, as a gift to us. Thank you so much. So, and then the next best thing is, we took a loan through NYSERDA, and it was tax-free. So we did nothing but win on that one. It was the best thing we ever did. So, after that little story, is there anything like that that people on City Island could take advantage of as well?
Yes, well, that's the success story. So there are programs for homeowners, who want to, I guess that there are income eligible programs, but there's also just tax incentives for installing solar on your home that NYSERDA still provides, and where we'll provide a lot of the funding for installing a solar panel or rooftop solar. And then also for renters, if you can't, I'm a renter too, if you can't install your own solar, there's a community solar program where you can find a local community solar project to opt into, where you will still be you're still hooked up to the grid through your apartment, but you can opt in to get, basically connect to the community solar project so you can receive energy savings on your utility bill. And that program is an income eligible program. And we are trying actually to focus a lot more on community solar, because we know that is again a way to bring renewable energy to communities who might not be able to put it on your own home, and especially to lower income, more disadvantaged communities. So we're actually beginning a program where we're going to co-develop, co-design a community solar program with lots of community or frontline community groups, like Solar One, which is based in New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, Uprose, lots of different organizations are going to be a part of that process. And if you want to, there's a program called Solar for All, which I think covers more about this. Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question for Jenny? Oh, I'm sorry about that, Ariadna. Hold on. Turn this off. You have to turn it on so I don't, deafen everybody.
Can you hear me okay?
You gotta turn it on.
Hello? All right. Just thinking about the affected communities that you guys are targeting, there were a number of City Island residents that had entry and lower basement level space that flooded during Ida. I personally lost my apartment, like the whole thing. My son and I lost everything. So we moved, we're still on the island, but I can't tell you a lot of the work. So we also have a volunteer group, and a lot of the folks that we saw deeply impacted by Ida were folks that were in unlisted basement apartments, or in entry, floor level units, and that also disproportionately, what we noticed, a lot of immigrants, a lot of folks, maybe English wasn't their first language, a lot of single parent households, and all of us were scrambling to figure out how to get any type of assistance after that happened. So particularly affecting renters, that even if the owner of the property could get some form of assistance, eventually, federally, a lot of renters were completely displaced. So just something to think about as your office is doing outreach and thinking about affected communities. One thing that our group in particular noticed is that language accessibility, making sure that you're taking into consideration so many of the folks that get impacted in environmental disasters that involve flooding are the folks that are in these unmarked or not legal entry, like basement level units, ground level units, and they often have nowhere to go. Like if they call in DOB, if they call in anybody else, it's like, well, we've got nothing for you, it's uninhabitable. So, we just say it from experience and some of what we dealt with in Ida, trying to get people physically to safety out of those units and then trying to help them after the fact. We just learned there really wasn't a lot of assistance, and FEMA came maybe months and months later and primarily for the property owner. So just food for thought. Second thought, I'm sure people have seen this, the astronomical price of Con Edison and how that has, so just thinking about, as we're thinking about alternatives with community solar as a possibility, we know so many folks that are trying to figure out what to do because right now the price of fuel, the price of, and therefore the price of heat, which now, we're transitioning seasons, it's going to be into air conditioning. So we know a lot of vulnerable populations, they don't know how they're going to pay their electric. They don't know how they're going to pay their fuel. So if that's a thing that NYSERDA can get involved in, I'm sure that a lot of New Yorkers, here in City Island and elsewhere, would appreciate.
Amen.
Thank you for that, just sharing your story, and I'm so sorry. That's just, that's awful. I mean, yeah, it's just terrible, just even, we all think of hurricanes, but, that was also just mostly the rain, which was just, just horrifying, the effects it had. And yeah, I actually am also working on energy affordability issues, exactly what you're talking about. People are in so much debt from the pandemic in terms of paying their energy bills, and I sit on this interagency task force that is focused on addressing energy affordability issues. And NYSERDA, we are trying to push our counterpart agencies, like the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance, OTDA. They're the agency on the state level that provides all this social services like SNAP benefits, and they also provide the rent relief assistance and relief for paying for your energy bill. So they have what they call the Home Energy Assistance Program. Yeah, the HEAP program, and that is federally funded, but it's distributed on the state level. And we're trying to push that HEAP program. Provides utility bill assistance for folks to help pay for their heating in the winter, if you're qualified based on your income, or if you are you have debt, your utility debt. And then we're also trying to push for them to allocate more assistance to pay for utility bills during the summer. And they actually are doing a good job during the pandemic. They have been allocating a lot more funding to help pay for cooling during the summer, and the Public Service Commission also passed a temporary order during the pandemic to help people pay for their utility bill during the summer more. And we're trying to think through how to address this in a more long-term way as people we're transitioning to renewable energy, and how do we make sure it's affordable, and especially how do we make sure that the burden of ratepayers is not on low-income communities. And so definitely trying to keep that at the top of mind, and so I'll leave it there.
Okay, this is just a comment to what Adriana said about the help being for the owners and not the renters.
Yeah.
And I don't know if, this is not a problem unique to City Island, it's a problem unique, at least to the United States, and I'm assuming to the world, is that more and more properties are being acquired by big holding companies, private equity, whose only interest is the shareholders. On my street, Hawkins Street, there's a house that was sold, the longtime renter, they raised her rent so high she moved upstate. And then the City Island owner rented it to a young couple, and then after they signed the lease, she sold it to a big real estate holding company. This young couple went on vacation for a week. A bunch of zombies came in and ripped out all the rose bushes in her yard and decimated it. The young man told me in the winter that they hadn't had heat for a couple of months, and when he called for help, they said, well, you're the only house we own in the Bronx, and so you'll have to wait. And this is not just, this is the major problem that we're facing, is that wealth is going into the hands of very few people, and all they're interested in is the shareholders. They'll run it into the ground and then dump it.
So I will take that. So there is actually a bill in the legislature right now. A lot of this is called flipping. And basically what they do is a company will come in, they'll buy the property, they'll rehab it, and they'll flip it for a multiple amount, of what the house was worth. And that drives up everybody's real estate values, drives up a lot of things, drives up the rent. And there was a bill that's advancing through the legislature. I don't think it's passed the assembly yet. But the pretense of this bill is like, you want to go in there, you want to do that? Fine, we're going to tax you. If you're going to do that just to drive up rents, you're going to be taxed more. So the problem you're speaking at is very real, and it is working through being addressed. It's not as much an environmental issue, but it is an issue of equity. It is an issue of the economy and economic justice. I want you to know that it's not being ignored, and I will find out about that bill for you.
I have one more question.
Okay.
I have been reading that in some states, they're now thinking about passing laws that require when a one or two family home is purchased, that the buyer be required to live in it for an entire year.
While that might be a nice thing, and we all don't probably like absentee landlords, you can't compel somebody to live anywhere. We have freedom of movement in the country, but it's an idea. It's an idea. Does anyone else have a question related to the environment? Just want to give everyone else, and then I'll let you close it up. No one else over here has a question? Just want to make sure. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Patrick, go ahead.
Me again. So, back to NYSERDA and energy. So, one thing unique about City Island is we get a lot of wind. We don't always get a lot of sun. Of course, now and again is good. But what do you think about the reality of investing in a wind energy kind of resource? Do you think have people thought about that, especially in a circumstance like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head if they've thought about City Island specifically.
Oceanside.
Well, yeah, I think there is a lot of offshore wind projects that we are funding off the coast of Long Island. And there is an offshore wind manufacturing facility that they're building in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, because that is a nice port area that will make it easier to bring everything down to Long Island after, or vice versa, depending on what they're doing at this facility. But yeah,
I think, if I'm not mistaken, our current Congress member, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she just gave a bunch of money for SUNY Maritime to actually do educational programs based on this, to do much more wind turbine related stuff. So we can definitely look into that.
Yeah, and I think part of what they're trying to do in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, and maybe you all are involved in this work too, but Uprose, the Environmental Justice Group in Sunset Park, is trying to really make their port area, which was a heavy, industrial area and provided a lot of local, blue-collar jobs to the area. They're trying to now position it to be kind of a green industrial district where they're going to be doing a lot of green job workforce training related to the offshore wind industry and other clean energy green jobs. So yeah, I think, and that's part of, the economic benefits that are going to be coming out of all these offshore wind projects. They have to have a certain amount of community benefits, or they often will enter into community benefits agreements to allocate investments to the local community. So I think, yeah, and I think that because of the resources that City Island have, I can't promise or commit to anything, but I'm sure.
But dialogue. We're having the dialogue. So that way when you go back to all these councils and committees, you'll remember that you had all these pain on the neck people from City Island who were super interested in this.
Yeah.
Great golf course. That would be great. Have all those wind
Yeah, I actually agree with that too.
Yeah.
I think that I won't.
Trump golf course, yeah.
Yeah.
Not a point of pride for the neighborhood, that's for sure. Anyhow, thank you for everything.
Yes, and can I say one more?
Of course you can.
So I think we are very aware of the renter versus homeowner, and especially for renters, just you have a lot less power, and there's there's a split incentive with the landlords who don't care as much about getting all these free energy efficiency programs because they're not going to benefit if they're not paying the bill, and so yeah, I think that's something we're trying to really think of and making sure that all these new clean energy, renewable energy projects are going, and energy efficiency, all these things are going to actually benefit all people in marginalized communities, not just the homeowners. And I think our programs are definitely skewed towards homeowners in a lot of sense. So that's something we're trying to think about. And yeah, I can go more in depth about what is considered a disadvantaged community, but we also are going to be having public hearings where we're trying to share more information, and you can actually weigh in on how we're defining a disadvantaged community in a slew of public hearings that are coming up. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't want to get too wonky, but I could go more into that.
We appreciate you, and maybe what we'll do, if you're okay with it, we'll do maybe a Zoom call. Everybody can hop on, and we'll get super wonky on all this stuff.
Yeah, we're
I would love
actually
that.
doing like disadvantaged community criteria, kind of like info sessions.
I would love that, and I think everyone here would too. This way, we can get as wonky as we want. We'll get real in the weeds on all this stuff. Thank you. You're a wonderful guest. Actually, you both were. Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming out. I know we have been here for a while, so I'm going to do a little bit of quick rapid fire on a few things that are still going on that I didn't do the first time, because I'm looking down here at my notes and I'm like, oh, these other things people might want to know about or is timely. First thing, redistricting. Everyone knows that a judge from Steuben County, backed up by the New York State Appellate Court, decided that the congressional lines were unconstitutional and partisan gerrymandered, and the state Senate lines were also unconstitutional because they didn't follow the process. He didn't say they were partisan gerrymandered, but they basically all have to be redrawn. There's a gentleman who's, by all accounts, very objective and fair. He did the lines in Pennsylvania, which are broadly considered fair. He's going to be doing the lines for all of New York State now. So it's going to be very interesting to see what he comes up with. So all the concern we had about being in New York's 3rd congressional district, we'll see. It may change now. So we don't know what's going to happen, but what we do know is that the primaries, there are going to be 2 New York State primaries this year for whatever party you are. It's going to be, the first one's going to be in June 26th. You're going to, 25th? It's the last Tuesday of June. My apologies, I got the day wrong. It's going to be the statewide offices and the state assembly.
But do we know who's running?
Well, those ones we do. Those ones there have been no changes.
Okay, you're right.
Then there's going to be another one in late August.
Okay, got it.
That primary we don't know. So it's very confusing, and I'm sorry for that, but I didn't cause it. For that one, it's the congressional lines, which are all going to be redrawn, and the state Senate lines, which may also be redrawn as well.
But the state people will be running?
We don't know. Because technically someone could run for governor and then decide at the end of their governorship, if they or governor's race rather, if they lost, they could go back running for Congress because they're on 2 separate dates. This is like the old system we used to have where the state lines and the congressional lines were on 2 different days, and then we bridged that starting in 2020. Remember when AOC got elected? That was a primary on its own, and then later on there was the Klein-Biaggi primary. It's the same thing pretty much. So it's going to be a little confusing. We were working to do a candidates night through another group. We're going to continue. We're just waiting for some clarity on that. But the goal will be to bring, I'm sure there will be candidate forums and things like that nature as things get started. But I just wanted people to be aware that these changes are happening and that a lot of the concern we had being thrown into Long Island hopefully will be addressed. And I pretty sternly wrote an email today to that effect. Hopefully it gets counted. Number two, we've been working to try to get an urgent care on City Island, and we're actually, we had a prospect that looked like it was going to be very good. It kind of fell through. So we're going to be working with the Borough President's office trying to get an urgent care on City Island. Ironically, that's one of the criteria for a disadvantaged community is access to medical care. And we are rated at the bottom of that particular criteria. So sometimes these metrics do guide you in towards of things your community is lacking. 3, UPK. We are still working on UPK. As people know, an email went out about UPK on City Island being run by Bronx House. There's a meeting tomorrow to work out some of the DOB related issues. We're going to need to get a change of the certificate of occupancy, but things are moving forward and we're all hopeful for that. We want to get UPK back on City Island. Universal pre-kindergarten. This was de Blasio's big initiative to get the 3-year-olds and the 4-year-olds. We had a program at St. Mary's. Unfortunately, the Archdiocese chose not to continue it, so a lot of the younger families on the island have been at a disadvantage of that.
That school is empty now?
Yes. So we are, and the program would not be there. It's probably going to be on the corner of Carroll Street over here. That's where we've been working. Maria and I have been working to get it in there. Nothing is finalized.
Modern building there?
Yes. Which the nice thing about that is there are 2 floors there. So you can have a floor for the 4-year-olds, a floor for the 3-year-olds, and then ideally 4 or 5 years down the road, this is just John Doyle speaking, not the nonprofit speaking, but get some sort of programming in there for the young adults as well, because there are 3 different floors. On the good news front, next month, the Bronx 29 bus starts going 24/7. There are going to be a few, yes, that's a good news one. There are going to be a few bus stops that are removed. The reason this is happening is so the bus goes a little bit faster, and so the bus can do the entire loop from Pelham Bay Station and back in 30 minutes. That's what's needed to keep the bus route working. And then, once it's going 24/7, our next push, which I probably shouldn't even say this because it's not even 24/7 yet, but the next push will be to make it more frequent than the 30 minutes. So that'll be the next push thereafter, is to have a more frequent bus run. So we're working on that. We have a good connection with the MTA. We've been sending all the complaints in. Things are moving in the right direction there, but next month's going to be a big milestone in that effort. This is actually interesting. Did anyone get a chance? There was an article in the New York Times speaking about the relationship between the Congresswoman and the mayor, and
what is the grant?
so we are working. I'm involved in that, and David's involved in that too. We have been working with the Congresswoman's office. She's got a great staff over there to try to get grant money through the bipartisan infrastructure bill to put the utility lines underground. And again, nothing is final, but the Congresswoman and her staff have been on top of this. They have gotten the mayor's office open to the idea. They have gotten Con Edison open to the idea. We are just now waiting on the grant criteria as it comes out from the governor's office. So that was what it was. Because I had 4 or 5 people go to me, what the hell are you doing? So now you know, but it's not done.
That's the only thing they agree on.
Yes. Well, if I can bring different viewpoints together, I mean, you know. So we are making progress on that as well. And again, we want to thank the Congresswoman's office because she's been great. Also, these test kits, that's from Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's office. So wanted to give them out to everybody. She's been great in that regard. And then finally, the composting. I know people want composting back on the island and in the greater community as well. Portions of our greater community of, the Eastern Bronx, CB10 area, were some of the pilot programs for the composting program. People remember that about 5-7 years ago. We are working now with, at least in the interim, a private vendor. David and I have been having conversations. We may have a drop-off site on the island soon. It will be probably requiring people to pay $5 or $10 a month. She will come pick it up weekly and take it to be composted. So we are working to make that affordable. We are working to make that happen. And that's where we are with that too. But those are the things that are moving right now. Not everything is done. Not everything's like the bus, where we kind of have a date where the bus is going to start. But things are kind of moving in the right direction on City Island, and we're grateful for that. Does anyone have, yes, Peter?
A sailboat that's up against the bridge. Do we know anything of that?
Yes. So, believe it or not, when I, 15 years ago, when I started in government, one of my first calls was Virginia Gallagher, and she was complaining because the boats from Consolidated were crashing into her pier. And she would get the names of the boats and call in, and one of them was a friend of mine who actually was using, and I said, your boat just crashed into her pier, and he goes, no, that's the real owner's boat. He hung up the phone on me. This issue requires several different hands of government. Because what's happening right now is if it's not in navigable water, the feds don't want to touch it. And if it's not on land, particularly city-owned land, the city's not going to touch it. Wow. And then we are left with these boats just deteriorating before our eyes, pretty much. And I am trying to work with the legislators. I took a photo because we were out there for the Elizabeth Mass Memorial, and the boat's right against the bridge. Right there.
It's got to be doing some damage.
Yes. So I was like, hey, can we find out where this bill is? And believe it or not, this is a big problem also in the city of Buffalo. Buffalo has a very similar problem with this. So I'm aware that legislators are working on it. I don't want to scoop anybody, but I think by next month I'm going to have a lot more information for you on that one. Does anyone else? That's a good question.
Do you know whose boat it is?
I mean, to be fair, we find out who this boat is right now, it'll probably be someone else's boat in 2 months from now, because this has been a very frequent happening. So the thing is to get a framework on there to address it. Right now what happens is once a year, the city council appropriates funds through the Parks Department, and they come out and they remove the boats. But that happens annually, that's through the budgetary season, and that happens once a year. And what we're trying to do is create a regulatory framework where we're not paying for it, the person who owns the boat is paying for it. Georgia has a system which they use buoys and things of that nature. And if they find out it's your boat, and you don't go and get your boat, and Peter, I'm just going to use you as an example because you asked the question. If Peter owned that boat and it was crashed in there, and we could find out it was Peter's boat, Peter has 30 days to remove it. If he doesn't, we suspend his driver's license. Now, obviously it's not Peter's boat. We're not going to do that to him because we like Peter.
You don't need a driver's license to ride a boat.
That's true, but a lot of these folks do drive cars, so we get them on that. I mean, look, Lifeboat Louie, Lifeboat Louie would be the Lifeboat Louie loophole, I guess. But for everyone else in the world, it would create a tremendous inconvenience for them, and that's what we're trying to do here. And to also, again, this is in the very early stages, and it's not going to be addressed immediately, but to raise the taxes and fees on the boater registration, $5 or $6 per registration, to create a coastal maintenance fund. Because believe it or not, there is a program through the Department of State that actually exists, it's just never funded. So what is the funding mechanism? And this is something that has been thrown around in discussion. But again, it's got to be introduced, and it's got to pass both houses of the legislature. So we are not even on point A yet. So we'll see. Does anyone else have a question? Yes, Steve.
Rodman's Neck, anything to report?
Yes. So there was a meeting last night. It was about design things for Rodman's Neck. We're waiting to see what's in the mayor's executive budget for Rodman's Neck. There's supposed to be $220 million this year for Rodman's Neck. It's supposed to be the #1 capital item of the NYPD now that the Queens precinct, do you remember they built a new precinct in Queens? That got done, so this is supposed to be the #1 item. Beyond that, we have gotten the environmental reports. From what I have been told by people who know the science better and are much smarter than me, the environmental reports are inconclusive in terms of they don't show anything. So we are working to try to force an objective study, and we're trying to force the city. Remember, the city was going from 66% enclosure, because we're only the Bronx, we're not Queens, where they do 100%, to then all of a sudden it was 100, now we're back to 88. We're trying to push it for 100% enclosure, to limit the hours, and to do something about that bomb detonation range, which cannot be environmentally sound or safe. So The best things you can do with the range is if you see stuff going on there, pull out your phone, get video, send it to us, cityislandrising@gmail.com, one word. Let's continue to compile evidence on that, because we do play them at some of the Rodman's Neck Monitoring Committee meetings to show them, kind of shame them, about what's going on. There may be something else on the horizon for that in like the next week or two, so I'll be in touch with you on that. Cheryl.
I know, this may be a stupid question.
There are no stupid questions.
What are going ons? The park area or Rodman's Neck per se? What is it?
The shooting range.
Oh, no, I know that.
Yeah. You mean the goings-ons of people around there?
Okay, but we're talking about the people in the parking lot.
Oh, I get you. I thought the parking lot was closed since COVID. They've moved that to Orchard Beach.
Are
Okay.
there some shenanigans I don't know that go on?
I'm not aware. If they are, I'm not invited to them, so I'm not perfectly aware of them either. But we will.
What I'm asking is what's going on that's the problem?
So I believe it was closed, as Peter said, and as Nancy said, during COVID.
Right.
I remember it was a big issue because a few people I know in Castle Hill, like they were like doing rallies against it and stuff like that, and the mayor's office was calling about it. I haven't heard anything as of late what was going on there.
Oh,
I mean, look, it was like a hangout for like retired people for a while, where they would have a drink and they'd hang out in the parking lot. But
Play dominoes.
yeah, and they weren't bothering anybody. They weren't like the shooting range. Let's leave it at that.
I know someone who, before COVID, was coaching
Yeah.
baseball, Little League, and
Okay.
it can be quite violent because one of the kids hit a baseball that happened to hit a car, and 3 Tufts came over, and
All right.
they were doing things, and they're still doing that with Beach now. So yes, I mean,
Okay.
I've heard it's
If there's an issue that we can immediately address in a timely manner, let's speak on the side on it, and I'm happy to speak to the Parks Department. Orchard Beach opens May 25th, which is a Wednesday. So
All the shenanigans will go over there.
I guess so. I guess you're right.
No, they'll have to pay it.
Yeah, you've got to pay the fee, and we're looking into getting the senior fee because I sent that to the legislators, and they actually, the councilwoman's office emailed me and said that's a wonderful idea. So we'll see where that goes. But Stephen, if you get it done, maybe they'll name the bill after you. Okay. Well, I think there was supposed to be like a severely discounted was what he was after, and you could go back and forth if you wanted to leave. Does anyone else have a question, comment, concern?
Saturday is the disposal day at Orchard Beach.
Saturday is the disposal day at Orchard Beach, and we will be doing an e-cycling event soon with the same company we did last time. So that'll be fun. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you all for coming out.